There's an island off the coast of West Seattle that seems primarily inhabited by raccoons currently, but Washington State Parks wants your input on whether it should go back to nature or become a tourism hotspot. And it is somehow campaign season again. We'll get into the progressive candidates challenging longtime incumbents in the Washington legislature. But first, speaking of the legislature, yesterday, the Washington State Legislature passed House Bill 1687, which explicitly gives social housing developers the same rights as other housing authorities and public housing developers. It's essentially a bit of housekeeping to get things rolling for social housing, which is just starting to collect and distribute funds for projects now. Joining me to chat about this is Brett Hamil, writer, performer, and the cartoonist behind the weekly series Doom Loop. Brett, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
We also have creative producer Liam Billingham. Welcome, Liam.
Hello. Hi, Brett. Long time no podcast.
Yes. So how much you all know about this social housing initiative?
I don't know very much, frankly.
I've followed this saga through all of its twists and turns over the past few years.
I know you have, Brett.
Exhausting and infuriating twists and turns, but it's here. It's happening. The money's in the bank. Let's start building some stuff.
Let's go. So for people who don't have the background, we voted to pass I-135 in 2023. And the idea there was to build publicly owned affordable housing through a public development authority. So that is now called the Seattle Social Housing Development. And then in a special election last year, we voted for Prop 1A, which actually funded that housing development authority by a tax on companies that pay individual employees more than $1 million. So the funds are just now coming in, and it turns out they now have $115 million, which smashed the estimate of $53 million that was being...
Just smash that estimate.
Smash that estimate. They essentially, I think what that shows is that there are more Seattleites being paid more than $1 million than you might think. I think actually in response to that news, Katie Wilson had called our city filthy rich.
Oh, that's what. Yeah, right. I remember this now. Okay,
which is true. It's one of the wealthiest cities in the country.
Yeah, but I really do think it's remarkable that what advocates were estimating was 53 million, and what we got was more than twice that. So,
that's incredible.
Yeah. So with the passage of this bill, there was a photograph taken of Bob Ferguson signing it officially. Have you all seen this photo? I kind of want you all to...
I dropped it in the chat.
Oh,
I just
good.
dropped it in the chat
Good.
For the team.
Brett, can you describe what you're looking at here?
Bob encounters Housey. It's a moment that will always be remembered by social housing advocates, and it just underlines the power of Housey. I've been
So,
a long
okay,
time
who is
proponent
Housey?
of
Hold on, real quick. It
Tell us
actually
about
screams
Housey.
like Fergie when the edible hits to me. Like he's just like, what is? And it's like big. I'm stoned and I just realized it. Vibes in that photo.
For people who don't know who Housey is, Liam, describe what you're seeing. Who is Housey?
Oh, just getting over this. So Housey is like a Saturday morning PSA character between an episode of Captain Planet and Darkwing Duck, where they're like, "Hey kids, affordable housing is important," and he has like a blue body and a red roof, which I really like, and a little slot, and above it says, "How's our neighbors?" And he just looks like a happy guy. And he's confronting Bob Ferguson in front of the Seal of the State of Washington flag. And I would describe, we cannot see Ferguson's face, but I would say that he's sort of taken aback by the fact that he's talking to a lovable house. I don't know how else to describe this.
I saw in the comments of that, someone was like, oh, Housey got to meet Bob Ferguson. And someone else commented, Ferguson got to meet Housey.
Yes.
So, Brett, how much do you know about the Housey lore? I don't know how much Housey lore there really is.
I don't know that there's much Housey lore other than Housey represented Prop 1A and I-135 was very visible at rallies and other events on Election Day, etc. when Prop 1A won in a blistering landslide last year, I was able to dance with Housey at the Wild Rose along with other
Where's that photo,
revelers.
Brett?
There are photos. There are definitely photos.
I want one.
Housey has made an appearance in some of my cartoons. The people love Housey.
The people do love Housey.
And this just underlines, and I'm not a political consultant, although if anyone wants to put me on the payroll, I'm happy to give you some ideas. But we need more mascots in political messaging.
Totally.
I'm all
Housey
for
is
that.
the most approachable creature that you're ever going to meet. People love to see Housey. People love going big with it. And Housey is just this, I mean, who doesn't want more housing? So I just think it's a recipe for success. I've been trying to get local progressive candidates to add a mascot to their next campaign. I tried to convince Alexis Mercedes Rink that she needed a remember Lil Penny from the early 2000s? It was Penny Hardaway, an NBA player, and then he did endorsements, and he had Lil Penny, which was a little sort of marionette puppet, a tiny version of Penny Hardaway. And they were a big hit. I believe that Spike Lee directed these commercials, but I was really lobbying hard to try to get Alexis to have a Lil Alexis or Lil Lexi, just a little tiny puppet version of her. But she didn't need it. She won by like a fulfillion points. But
yes.
But I think that's how you got to grab people. We're in a different era, and most of this is driven by a deep-seated belief that the Seattle process, the way we normally do politics and the way the establishment and corporate interests do politics, is designed to intentionally bore you so you stop paying attention so they can do you dirt when everyone's tuned out. This is a way to keep people tuned in.
100%. 100%. And I think it's take the cue from professional sports, right? Like everyone loves these various characters. Of course, I can't think of a single one while we're having this conversation.
Well, but I don't love Bowie, but we've already discussed that.
Right. But it's still is memorable, and it's funny you mentioned Spike Lee because no one's better at marketing themselves than Spike is. And do you remember his Mars Blackman character? This kind of tiny version of himself that he played in She's Gotta Have It, then he used in advertising campaigns and marketing campaigns. I do think that sometimes you gotta do the low ball, easy kind of make it memorable. I'm never gonna forget Housey. He's gonna haunt my dreams now.
We are gonna always remember Housey. Okay, I did kind of a deep dive on just trying to look at every mention of Housey I could find, and I think the first mention I saw was in 2022 ahead of I-135. I saw that there was an appearance Housey made with someone from Real Change where Housey had a Real Change tag. It seems like based on some of How's Our Neighbor's social media posts that Housey uses he, him pronouns. And the
Not
part
he,
of
house.
this that I actually messaged How's Our Neighbors because I wanted to ask him about this. I noticed that a couple years ago, after Brett did a cartoon of Housey, Housey's face changed. Housey got a
facelift?
makeover.
There's
Wow.
a second Housey.
There's
not
there are
to
two
not to
Houseys.
destroy the mystique. And personally, I consider Housey non-binary until corrected otherwise.
Fair, yeah.
And I feel this way about most inanimate objects. There are characters in my cartoon like Blocky and Kirby who are just by nature to me non-binary.
Yes.
There is a second Housey, and I'm sorry to scare all the kids out
Wow.
there, but there is a second Housey. I actually did a flyer, like a graphic image for the Prop 1A campaign that they contracted me to do. And originally, and this is getting a little deeper into my lore, like I drew Housey. There's like a window up there where the human inhabitants' eyes look out. And I drew like visible eyes in there. And the only note they gave me on the flyer was, can you take the eyes out? It's starting to feel a little furry-ish, and that's not
we love
exactly
furries
the vibe.
over-
We
We love
do.
them, but it's just a little too strange and off-putting. Let's just keep Housey canonical.
Fair. So, Brett, you touched on this a little bit, but what is the role of pageantry in politics? I feel like we see some of this sometimes in Seattle, and it always makes big news. I'm thinking about the tree people, the tree activist singers who came to city council. What other examples of this do we have, and do we want more of this?
The one that comes to mind first is the surveillance cam guy who's shown up to protest all the sort of security panopticon legislation that the past council passed, enabling all these surveillance cameras. So it's just a human body with a big surveillance camera head. And it just gives you these visual images. And, a lot of what tree activists are fighting for is to, choke out zoning and building new housing and such. But I still think it's cool. Even if I don't agree with them, I think good. They're at least trying to do something to grab people's attention, to grab their imagination. Another slightly less recent example was when Tim Eyman showed up for a press conference dressed as Darth Vader when he was running the Referendum 65 campaign against car tabs to limit car tabs to a certain set amount.
I knew
so he got
did that,
so
but,
much
wow.
earned media off that,
Right?
And everyone was so titillated. And of course, in my opinion, the things he was advancing were horrible, and our state is still suffering from some of the work he did. But hey, man, at least he's out there trying and getting out of his comfort zone. I will applaud anyone who does that kind of thing.
Creative chaos. I'm all for it. That made me think of our very first show here at CityCast Seattle was on Election Day, and we talked to the person behind the Seattle Channel puppets. And
yes,
if people are not familiar, this group of people made little puppets that created videos where the puppets were taking the place of actual city council members, and it's kind of a commentary on how some city council members, these people felt, were puppets for other interests. And last I saw, they have not been putting out videos lately. The last video they put out was a video of Sarah Nelson's last public address, and they had written, "That's a wrap for season 1. Thank you, everyone who watched and cheered us on. We'll be taking a break and see how it goes with the new city government. Until we're needed again. XOXO. Seattle Channel."
I love those sock puppets. People, they are very beloved, especially in City Hall. People love them. And the thing to underline is that if you're a progressive or on the left end of the spectrum, especially, we are in a highly asymmetrical legacy media environment. You can almost, like clockwork, count on the network local news and the radio talk shows to be against whatever you're advancing. And the only way to sort of catapult over those gatekeepers is to do something big like that. And that's not going to change anytime soon with media consolidation and such. So this is what we've got to do now.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about how, of late, I'm getting really tired of the way Democrats do these ads where they're like, "Oh, Elizabeth Warren is calling me," and it feels like so fake and manufactured, but it's like, put Elizabeth
Joe,
Warren.
we did it.
Yeah, exactly. Put Elizabeth Warren in I don't know, a stormtrooper costume or something. Break the habit, because the problem is that when you portray yourself as so fastidious and astute, you lose people, because people, for better or for worse, want to have a good time. They want a little bread and puppet. They want to have this it makes it more memorable and more fun, and it kind of makes you feel like a real person.
Yeah,
which I think is really loud.
There's also a vast tranche of non-voters locally and nationally, people that are not planning to vote, and they need to be motivated in some way. Mm-hmm. You need people to stand up. Another sort of symbolic agitator I remember is the Save Our Sonics guy, Chris Brannon, who passed away a few years back. But he probably would have run for office at some point if he hadn't passed away, because he was so beloved by the community. He showed up to multiple parades every summer day. Everyone saw him and knew exactly who he was, with the big afro and everything. So, you got to give people something to hang on to. This is all part of this sort of populist groundswell that's happening in response to, like you said, those horribly mid Democratic texts that we all get
awful
every day.
So sanctimonious.
Well, speaking of elections, let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a few people who have announced their candidacies in the upcoming midterms. In the last week, 2 candidates have announced that they are running to challenge established Democrats. So Hannah Sabio-Howell is running to unseat State Senator Jamie Pedersen in the 43rd District. So that includes part of Capitol Hill, the U District, Fremont, Belltown, Montlake, Eastlake, Laurelhurst. And Ron Davis is challenging State House Rep Jerry Pollitt for Washington's 46th district. So that's North Seattle, east of Aurora, does not include the U District, also includes Lake Forest Park and Kenmore. Brett and Liam, are either of you familiar with either of these candidates?
Very excited for both of these candidacies. Ron Davis narrowly was defeated by Maritza Rivera.
A few hundred votes, I think.
By just a few hundred votes.
236, according to the Urbanist piece.
Yes, it just a real heartbreaker of a vote. And instead of just sort of retreating and going to figure out what else he's going to do next, he has definitely built a record of pontificating and commentating on like local politics and standing up for worthy causes and issues. So he's done everything you want to see someone do who just suffered such a heartbreaking defeat. He's a good guy. He's strong on the issues. He's very smart, and I think he's got a good shot at this one. And Hannah, I'm less familiar with, but she does seem to have a great record of understanding how the Senate works. She worked on the Senate Democrats comms team and has done and was also a legislative aide and such. So someone who's really strong on the issues, knows how the sausage gets made, etc. So both of these very strong contenders. I'd be very concerned in this political environment if I was a long-time incumbent. Yeah. I mean, Peterson's been in office for over 20 years at this point. And Pollitt, I think, similar has been
since 2011.
Okay, so almost getting up on 20 years. So there's a strong anti-incumbency bias, especially in the Democratic Party. Approvals for the Democratic Party as an organization are down there with Iran. So so to see people come in, and of course even the most normie libs in the suburbs are furious about what they see Trump doing. They want, over and over again, they say, we want a fighter. We want someone to, and sure, this is all the state legislature, but there's plenty of places to fight within the state legislature against Trump and, looming fascism and authoritarianism. So I think the wind's at both of their backs, and, they got a good shot at this.
I was more familiar with Hannah, and just because she came up on my algorithm at some point, probably because of the stuff that I follow, and I found before I knew she was running, this is months ago, I found her like well-spoken and smart on these issues and like kind of a progressive. And Ron, I was not familiar with until I started reading up on him today. And I just think the message that is totally on point from both of these people and is stuff that they're thinking about. And I feel like we can talk more about this, but they both sort of fit into this like, sort of profile of what people want to vote for. Like Ron feels a little bit like a Buttigieg, who's like, perennially popular among a certain type of, let's say, like center to left progressive. And Howell fits into this pattern of like, she's younger, she's progressive, she's female. I mean, look at what's going on in the city council. Like, it just feels like if we're talking about sort of representation beyond their actual issues that they're concerned about, they both fit a popular and rising mold of politician.
And both candidates are running on affordable. Both candidates are running on an affordability platform, which I think if you look back at the mayoral election, clearly was something people resonated with. So, I was just thinking, actually looking at Davis's platform and also his general presentation of his own story, I was thinking, Liam, he is you in a lot of ways. He's got, well, I think you are his target audience. You've
absolutely.
Also got 2 young kids. Mm-hmm. One of the things he's campaigning for is affordable childcare. I think he's around your age, but yeah, I guess I was curious to hear the Liam and Brett takes on Davis in terms of, it seems like he's a peer essentially to both of you in town.
I never. You're making me look at myself in a way that I haven't considered,
me
but
too.
Sure. I mean, I would say if anything, Davis would be slightly more moderate than how I skew overall. But after watching him and his mastery of local issues and policies, I think he's a solid. He can get the job done, no question. The other thing to consider is that Pollitt and Peterson, they both there is got to be a stack of oppo on both of them for all the dirt they've done in Olympia. So just the most recent example, which is going to be on every single ad that Sabio-Howell puts out, is he tried to add a $500 million corporate tax cut into the millionaire's tax.
Right.
I mean, even when this guy is like doing something like sponsoring a tax on wealthy people, he has to shoehorn a giveaway to corporate interests. And that has been he has a long record of doing that on numerous issues that impact probably every voter who's going to vote in that election. He's the guy who waters it down until the point where it's okay for the corporate overlords, and we all know what that looks like here in Seattle. And I think we're all sick of it at this point. Let's just shoot the moon instead of giving, he's a guy who negotiates against his own position before the bill even goes up for a vote. So he's already figuring out a way to placate the corporate interests before the bill's even fully written. And it's just, we can't do that anymore. I think with the rise of Trump and just everything around us, we understand now that Democrats cannot negotiate against their own position before they even pass a law, especially in a Democratic trifecta state. I mean, you can pass whatever you want, buddy. And it's and what they're bringing us is weak sauce. And I think it's time, it's time to throw some elbows.
Holding in office for 15 to 20 years is really quite remarkable, and it does seem like the time could be ripe for some shakeups there. Coming back to one thing you said earlier, Liam, that you had seen Hannah's videos on your feed. I too have noticed both of these candidates on TikTok in recent months. Is a social media presence a prerequisite these days?
Yes.
For a campaign?
Yes. I mean, I think so. Two things. I think that's what matters is like the reality is, and I have a free piece of advice for Ron Davis that I'm going to throw at the end of this. But I think. Look, we all know that people are reading less and watching more, right? And that obviously has massive disadvantages. But I think one thing that it can do in the way that, we're not watching super high produced ads on television anymore, right? We have more direct access to this person being themselves and being filmed about it. And that doesn't mean that they're not sort of reading a script or playing the game, but it's that's how we connect. I mean, I think, we've talked about it a million times, but Zoran Mamdani won because of his social media presence, right? And I think that both of these folks have something in common with him, which is a positivity. Neither one of them, like they're, Republicans and even some moderate Democrats are, it's all terrible, everything's terrible. No one wants to hear that anymore. We're exhausted by it. To Brett's point earlier, we want, I think, a more positive sort of approach. And I think in some ways, Brett, to your point about Ron Davis feeling a little more moderate, a big tent approach that feels like it could lean more progressive. And he reads to me as someone that will lean that way if he's pushed, a little bit that way. So it's to me, it's all about the image right now and the way that you're perceived. And I think social media can cut through the noise, again, as Brett mentioned earlier, of local cable channels, bigger media presences actively being against what you're saying. You have the platform, and if you have smart social media employees, or I hope not, but at least paid interns, it can cut through a lot of that crap. I think that it's absolutely the most key way to get your message out at this point.
Mm-hmm. Ron Davis has also spent the past few years just establishing himself. He has a newsletter as well, which is, I think, pretty widely read among City Hall circles. And so he's been establishing this record. A lot of times people just show up and they're like, who's this person? You could say this for Hannah too. Hannah and Ron both, they've established, they're not just someone who's like, why not me? I could do that job. They're people that have actually, voiced concerns and pushed for policy even when they weren't in power. So a lot of times you'll Google something about some minutia of Seattle politics, and Ron's his Substack or whatever will show up as one of the first hits.
Oh wow,
it's called
that's
Rendezvous. Cool. And so he,
that's a good name.
That's
for
a good
newsletter.
dad joke name.
Yes, exactly. That's one thing that we need more of is institutional memory, because Seattle voters have about a 3 to 6 month long memory of what happened previously in the last legislative session or whatever. So just establishing resources. It's actually really a public service to do that, to write about and pontificate on the minutia of legislation, etc. And so in doing that, he's showing that he does have sort of that spirit of service that you're actually looking for. He's not profiting from this in any way other than maybe establishing his policy bona fides. So to do that is also very much appreciated by me as someone who's horrified at the state of local media in Seattle. Yeah.
I feel like we are going down a long road to November. We've got 8 more months of campaigning. We've already got a few candidates who have announced they're running. So in addition to Sabio-Howell and Davis, we've got Jalen Scott, who is running for position 2 in Washington's 37th district. She is currently executive director of the Lavender Rights Project. She is currently not running against an incumbent, though. She's not going to be running against an incumbent because the current person in that position is Chapalo Street, who is going to run to replace Rebecca Saldana, who is going to run for the open seat on the King County Council that was vacated by Gurmai Zahalai when he became the King County executive. So there's just kind of musical chairs happening. But it will be interesting to see if anybody tries to run against her for that position. And we got 8 more months to go. So let's leave it there for now.
Wait, no, really quickly. Because we have 8 months. Ron Davis, my little advice for you. Your mic's a little hot, bud, in your campaign video. It's peaking. But I think this is actually a real thing. Like, it's hard to listen to, or I'm like, just turn it down a hair. Turn it down a hair. It'll sound better.
He's getting so excited that he's redlining.
Well,
Yeah,
Brett,
exactly. Maybe that's a good thing.
What mascots or political spectacle do you think that these candidates could use to up their campaign here?
I mean, I am willing to take the idea that Alexis Mercedes Rink rejected and say, how about Lil Ron Ron? You know, just a little Ron puppet.
Cute.
He's a bald white guy, so it's going to be easy enough to make it instantly recognizable. Lil Ron, man, let's do it.
Love it. That's really
All right, thanks for your free campaign advice, Brett. Let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about a little-known island off the coast of Seattle. Do you all know Blake Island?
Not until today.
I found out about it yesterday, so I'm way ahead of Brett because
Okay,
I wrote a piece in the newsletter.
I am so glad that neither of you knew about it before recently, because I too just learned about Blake Island. So for people who don't know, it is off the coast of West Seattle, kind of between West Seattle and Vashon Island. And I think looking in that direction towards Vashon, like across the sound, it's hard to tell the topography of things. I didn't realize that there was a whole island that I was looking at that was kind of in front of Vashon. How much do you all know about the history of Blake Island now that we've established that it exists?
Just what I've read in the link I was sent, and I have to say, and this I just found out about this morning, and I am so excited about this knowledge now. I'm pumped that I know it.
So I'll say this came up because Washington State Parks is trying to figure out what to do with that island. But I'm going to speed run you through a history of this island.
Jane's History Corner. Let's do it.
Let's go. So, of course, this was a land long inhabited by the Coast Salish people. The modern day descendants of those people are the Suquamish and Muckleshoot tribes. So the federal government took that land in 1855 as part of the Point Elliott Treaty. I will not get into the full history of that, but that's the infamous treaty where many local indigenous people ceded their land rights for the right to self-governance. So that island has changed hands several times. So in the 1850s, it was a public domain land trust. It was named after a guy who worked for the U.S. Coast Survey. It was named for him by a buddy of his. U.S. Coast Survey was like one of the first research institutions in the U.S., which now has become NOAA. This guy later was like superintendent of the U.S. Naval Academy. Some guy who was a sawmill entrepreneur in the 1800s bought 2/3 of the island for $525.
Wow.
He harvested all of the timber there to build a university. And then in 1903, a lawyer named William Pitt Trimble purchased this island to build a home on it. He and his wife and their 2 kids, built a whole little compound on there. But then his wife died in a tragic car accident, and he just never went there again. And then he sold it to cover losses from the Great Depression. In 1949, some teenagers went to the island and made a fire, but they accidentally set that whole house that Trimble built on fire. In 1957, the owner offered to sell it for $250,000. I'm just thinking about how wild it is.
The whole island.
The whole island for $250,000, which you can't get you any parcel of land in Seattle in today's money. But in the 1960s, it became a state park. A concessionaire named William Hewitt came in, and he held salmon bake events and built something called Tillicum Village, where he had dancing and wood carving demos done by 2 of his buddies who were white guys and not indigenous. In looking at the history, there was a quote on the state park site that said William Hewitt sought to capitalize on the growing interest in indigenous cultures by developing a thematic restaurant. And the plan was to open all of this to coincide with the World's Fair in 1962. Project got kind of held up. Over the years, to Hewitt's credit, he did eventually involve actual indigenous people. Fast forward to 2009, the buildings on the island were leased by Argosy Cruises, and they did cruises there for a while. You could do like a day trip. I think you could spend the night. They ended their lease there, though, in 2021. And since then, it seems like the island has had many fewer visitors. That kind of makes sense, because otherwise you kind of need your own boat or transportation to get there. So looking at the Washington State Parks numbers, 100,000 people visited in 2019, but it was less than half of that in 2024. Most of that decrease was in people who just went there to spend the day. So now the Washington State Parks Department is trying to figure out what to do with it. So they are thinking about several different plans. Some would create public transportation to the island or improvements to the marina or the buildings that are there. They want to know what to do with that old Tillicum Village. They did request $30 million from the state budget for improvements to that marina, but it ultimately was not funded. So I'm curious what you all would like to see from this. And currently they're letting the public weigh in on this. So if you're listening and you have thoughts about it, weigh in.
We'll put the link in the show notes so you can leave comments.
So there are 4 major options. One is let it go back to nature. That's the cheapest option. Kind of just don't do much. And if people want to go there, they can go there. The second is to focus on kind of creating a rustic retreat. So improving the marina, letting people primarily use it for the day just to go hang out. The third is really pumping up the concessions, like trying to get someone to be the main concessionaire there. So reviving Tillicum Village programming, just really trying to get as many tourists there as they can. And then the fourth is a more focus on overnight recreation. So if you wanted to take a little boat out there and spend the night instead of just being there for the day. What do you all think? What do you all want to see happen? I want to go to this island, number one, but because I've never been. But what would you guys like to see happen?
I think, excuse me, I grew up on a beach town in Massachusetts that had like a similar little island close to it, and it was, I don't know what's happened to it in the years since I've been gone, but at the time you could just kind of take a little boat, like a little dinghy across and go there, and like nothing was going on there. It was kind of untamed. And I thought that was nice because it got you away from the kind of noise of densely populated Massachusetts. So my attitude is I think it should be somewhere between back to nature and rustic retreat. I think we should have like boats that take you there, maybe a small concession, like place to get or something to, buy what you might need for the day, whatever. But like kind of let it just exist and let it be kind of a space where you can kind of feel among nature. That to me feels like what would be the best approach. Because like we live in this incredibly beautiful state, but it's hard to get away from folks. And I like the idea of being able to do so from Seattle on just a quick little boat ride.
I'm going to have to agree. Somewhere in the rustic range for me. We don't need to figure out a way to make everything profitable. Just like you said, a gift shop with, maybe a couple T-shirts and the things you would need to tool around on the island. I also grew up near a place off the coast of southeast Georgia called Cumberland Island, which had like a mansion that, fell into disrepair, and there were some, wild horses that ran around. But other than that, it was just some trails, and you walk around, and when you're done, you go wait for the ferry to take you back. And that just seems like an incredibly enjoyable and liberating way to spend an afternoon.
Forgot, right? Like,
yeah,
I love that.
Just give people that. If they do go with the full concession package, etc., I think it would be nice to see some indigenous folk from the area given an opportunity to bid on that and like maybe actually make some money back from all the exploitation that's happened in the history of that island.
100%. My initial thought about this was, and I believe they are consulting with tribes about what they would like to see. I would love for them to have most of the decision-making power here. Or if we're going to let it go back to nature, it seems like the raccoons are going to have most of the decision-making process.
Yes. If you read some of the comments there was a West Seattle blog article that you sent me, and it paints a picture of a Scooby-Doo caper waiting to happen.
Oh, my dream.
First off, it's loaded with aggressive raccoons. And apparently the longtime ranger there is a really grumpy, guy who spies on anyone who camps there. So it's just got there is also an era of menace, and it's someone from the coastal southeast. Going into unspoiled areas of nature always comes with it a little bit of menace. So that's just part and parcel with it.
And I think that's even in a weird way an argument for it, because
that's what I mean.
Yeah, it just has that feeling of like, I experience this far too rarely in life. The like, where am I? Like, I can still see Seattle, right? But you know what I mean? But I'm kind of like I love the idea of like an old mansion that's overgrown, and like, it just seems like it could be really exciting, and I don't know, I'd love to bring my kids there and give them that kind of like, yes. See, this is what it's like this, it really, really...
There's no Wi-Fi here, kids. Go
Exactly.
find something else to do.
So just use the 5G to watch TV. No, I'm kidding. But like, yeah, I think like, yeah, go like run around and be a kid. That's what you should do on this island.
I'm just delighted that there's a whole ass island I've never heard about that is so close to Seattle.
Yeah.
I cannot get over that. I'm like, what other joys are lurking, waiting for us?
There's an island in Green Lake.
That's true, which is also uninhabited, but I think there's less question
it's
of
very
what...
small.
Yeah, I think it's mostly
how
like
big could that island be?
a few 100 feet across. I think mostly
I'm
like
looking
teens
at it. Duck
paddle.
Island?
Yes, I think teens paddle there and battle the goose crap there to like go have a
joint,
Smirnoff Ice or something. Yeah, like
they're icing each other on Duck Island. Nice.
That's what Duck Island is for.
Amazing.
Well, it will be interesting to see what they decide here. I think they're in the middle of that public comment session still. So again, if you have thoughts about that, you, listener, can weigh in. So I think that's all for today here at CityCast Seattle. Liam, thank you for abiding my little history corner.
I love a history corner, Jane. Thank you.
And Brett Hamil, writer, performer, cartoonist, thank you for being here. Speaking of being a performer, Brett, I know you've got some shows coming up.
I do have some big... This is a big week for me. We've got our monthly installment of Joke Tellers Union at the Clock Out Lounge on Wednesday night, doors at 8 o'clock. And then on Saturday, my alter ego, Burl Dirkman, will be hosting the second installment of his talk show at Town Hall Seattle Saturday night with special guests Kenji Lopez-Alt and singer-songwriter Tomo Nakayama. So
such an amazing lineup.
Wait, you're Burl Dirkman? I had no idea.
He's a very, very close friend of mine, and we share many, many things together.
And you
including
go to
a body
phone booth and come out as him. I got it. That's
I can,
awesome.
if you need me to pass along a message, I do have that capability.
Tell him good job. He's doing great.
All right, well, go check out Brett's shows if you can. The one on Saturday in particular, just incredible lineup.
Yeah.
All right.
It's going to be very special.
I am looking forward. I'm going to try and get tickets myself.
Cool.
I'm your host, Jane C. Who, and listeners, we love to hear from you. Send us what you think should happen to Blake Island.
Any questions for Burl Dirkman? We can get those to him.
Yeah, we know a guy.
Any critiques of Ron Davis's comportment or delivery in his videos?
Yeah. No offense, Ron. We like you.
No, just send those directly to Liam. So
Or directly to Ron if you
Apparently,
really want.
he and I are very similar, so we're gonna hit it up.
Well, you can do all that or not by sending an email to seattle@citygas.fm. You can also text us or leave us a voicemail on the CityGas hotline at 206-880-3931. Until next time, see ya, Seattle.